Good afternoon and welcome again to the Norwich Bulletin editorial board meetings where we're talking with candidates running in the November 2nd general election. Our third candidate of the day is a candidate for the United States Senate, John Mertens, who is running on the Connecticut for Lieberman ticket.
That's correct.
In the U.S. Senate race.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to talk to you and to talk to all the people of Connecticut.
Let's start with the Connecticut for Lieberman ticket and your candidacy on this ticket. To be blunt, you're not a fan of Joe Lieberman.
I am not a fan of Joe Lieberman. I was very disappointed in his support of the invasion of Iraq after 9/11, and subsequently was very disappointed in his position on health care. My real home is the Independent Party. I've worked with the Independent Party for over 4 years, and in fact, my workers and I collected 7,000 of the 11,000 signatures to get the Independent Party statewide slate on the ballot this year. So I'm not going away after November. I'm going to continue to work hard to build a third party in Connecticut. The Connecticut for Lieberman Party involvement came about because in 2006, the Secretary of the State's office denied us a petition to collect signatures to get on the ballot, the Independent Party. So in '07, I read about John Orman, a professor at Fairfield University, who had taken over the Connecticut for Lieberman Party and controlled the ballot line for U.S. Senate with that party. And he was kind of making kind of a tongue-in-cheek effort where he had written party rules saying anybody but Joe Lieberman can run for the party, things like that. He was a great guy. Unfortunately, he passed away in the last year. So I contacted him and I said, you need to take this seriously. This party has real value. It's got a ballot line. They wouldn't even let us collect signatures to get on the ballot in really one of the most egregious betrayals of the public trust, in my opinion. It got me very angry. And he said, well, why don't you become the chair of the party and you take it over and write real party rules and write a process for nominating candidates and electing officers. So that's what we did. The Connecticut for Lieberman Party in Connecticut is now the most democratic party in the state. Anyone can register for the party, come to the statewide party caucuses, vote to nominate people for office. So we were using that as a vehicle to allow us onto the ballot. We defeated the Secretary of State's office in 2008 on all the points that they were trying to use to keep us off the ballot, to keep the Independent Party off the ballot. So now the Independent Party is a statewide party. As you know, because you interviewed him just a little while ago, Tom Marsh is the Independent Party candidate for governor. And I'm looking forward to continuing to build an independent movement in Connecticut.
But you're also going to keep hold of the Connecticut for Lieberman Party, and as we were talking earlier,
Right.
if Joe Lieberman decides to run for re-election in 2012,
Yes.
back you with my math there, I'm getting a little blurry-eyed, he's not going to have access to this party that he created.
Unless he registers for the party and comes to our statewide party caucus and pitches the party membership for his nomination. He's still a registered Democrat. He created this party after he lost the Democratic primary to Ned Lamont in 2006 in order to get on the ballot in November and won the general election as a third party candidate, but he never joined his own party. He's still a registered Democrat. So you're right. In 2012, if he decides to run for re-election, we will run someone against him on the Connecticut for Lieberman Party line.
Okay.
And well, anyway, I have to get, as long as we hold the ballot line.
Right.
I'm on the third line on the ballot this year. It'll be Linda McMahon, Richard Blumenthal, and then John Mertens. I expect to get significantly more than 1% of the vote. As long as I do that, we will maintain a ballot line for the Connecticut for Lieberman Party in 2012.
The reason I wanted to start the conversation there is you're going to agree with me that there's a lot of anger and frustration that
For good reason.
Among the electorate. Are you not concerned that doing what you're doing here with the Connecticut for Lieberman Party, that you run the risk of coming off as looking as either just another game player or someone who's very vindictive, and you've got a hard enough time being taken seriously in a race that features two high-profile candidates, for the U.S. Senate race as it is. Why run that risk of turning off, or potentially turning off people?
Well, if people are paying that much attention, which I hope they are, and they are asked, they say Connecticut for Lieberman Party, why is he doing that? Then I think they'll vote for me based on the issues. I have 30 detailed position statements on my website. By the way, I'm sure many people may not know about me. I'm a professor of engineering at Trinity College. I've been there 20 years. I also teach some public policy and environmental science. I've been very passionate about the need for problem solving in government. And we need intelligent, nonpartisan problem solving. That's why I'm really running. That's why I got involved in politics in the first place. I was asked to run by the chair of the Independent Party in 2006. And, we need people who will represent us and implement solutions to problems instead of caring more about getting reelected and building their own party's power. And that's what I see going on, especially in the US Senate right now. Mark Shields, he's on the NewsHour on PBS. He's my favorite news show. He said recently that the average Republican senator could walk past the average Democratic senator on the street and they wouldn't recognize each other because there's so little interaction across the aisle in the US Senate. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And we should have people who represent us working to solve problems. I'm an engineer. This is what engineers do. You define the problem, you define the goals, you look at the possible solutions and the benefits and costs of different solutions, and then you can agree to disagree on the philosophy behind which solution should be implemented, but you work together to implement a solution. And the US Senate used to be that way. It used to be called the Gentleman's Club, where at the end of the day, the Republicans and Democrats would get together, they'd go out, they'd talk, they'd argue, but in the bottom line, their best interests were for the American people, and that's not happening anymore.
But at the same time, this idea of building up their own party, that's in a sense what you are doing with your work with the Independent Party. You've got a long way to go before any third party, or in this case the Independent Party, it would be viewed, right or wrong, but would be viewed as a legitimate party. It comes, unless you're a lowlighter, as we talked about, unless you're a lowlighter or Joe Lieberman, getting a third party off the ground and accepted by enough voters in this state to where you can be the formidable or be part of that debate and discussion. So there is that sense to your candidacy as well in the party building. So why does that make you different than those that you criticize who only are concerned about their party building?
The Independent Party is a grassroots movement. They've gotten people elected in 6 towns around the state in municipal elections. And in fact, they've replaced the Republican Party as the minority party in Waterbury. This is a long-term plan. I'm not just running for US Senate. I'm running to repair our democracy, and I'm not going away. In 2012, I'll be here again, and hopefully for the Independent Party as well as possibly the Connecticut for Lieberman Party. The Independent Party doesn't owe anybody anything. Look at, there was a story about Janet Peckinpah in the paper today about how she's running for Congress, as you know, and the National Committee told her you have to do these certain things in order to get support of the RNC. The Independent Party won't have that. In fact, the only platform for the Independent Party is ballot access, anti-corruption, and nonpartisan problem solving. And then every candidate makes their own platform. So the Independent Party is running a host of candidates this year, dozens of them, for all different kinds of statewide and local offices. And you'll see people across the whole spectrum. This is what we need in a democracy. We need voters who educate themselves about the particular candidates and force them to tell the voters what they'll do if they're elected. I'm not hearing Linda McMahon or Dick Blumenthal do that. We need specifics about what legislation they will sponsor and fight for. Senators enact change through legislation, and they keep giving the same general rhetoric about vague statements, or they attack each other instead of specific legislation that they will fight for. I'd like to talk about some of that.
We will.
Okay.
Okay. Let me explore a few other issues here. When you talk about this grassroots movement, same could be said for the Tea Party. Grassroots movement to a certain degree. No real leadership, almost freestyle cruising. where everyone gets to decide where they want to eat each night. You don't have the schedule and formula. Your independent party is following that same track.
Oh, I disagree.
Okay,
I disagree.
where's the difference?
The independent party is a real party with a party chairman, with party rules that have, each town committee provides representation on the state central committee. We have caucuses, both local and statewide caucuses, to nominate candidates. We vet candidates. The Tea Party is not a political party. It's a movement that the energy is coming from an honest place. People are fed up with the lack of representation from the two major parties. But the Tea Party movement is not a political party that's running people for office. It started as a libertarian movement, and it has been absorbed by the Republican Party. There have been a lot of articles about the Republican Party spending a lot of money to take over the Tea Party movement in certain parts of the state. That's kind of backfired on them in some places, for example, in Delaware. So I don't agree that the independent party in Connecticut is the same thing as the Tea Party movement. It's an actual political party with structure, with a party chairman, with a state central committee, with candidates that have been elected. People in Waterbury have been fighting corruption down there with the independent party for 10 years or 6 years, with limited success, I might add. So it's a real political party.
But where are your political philosophies? You lean progressive.
Definitely.
Democrat.
Especially on social issues.
Yeah.
I would be called a progressive. I hate the terms liberal and conservative.
Most people do.
I'm a problem solver. And I really want to talk about, I have 30 detailed position statements on my website. I think any Democrat, Independent, or Republican that went to my website, mertens2010.com, and read my positions, took the time to read the legislation that I am proposing, I think every American would support them because they solve problems. Let me give you an example.
Sure.
The mortgage crisis and the recent banking regulatory bill that was passed. It will not prevent future mortgage crises. Even the proponents of the bill have admitted this. They've said it'll make them less frequent and less severe, but it's not going to prevent future crises. Well, there's a very simple piece of legislation that would have prevented this mortgage crisis and any future mortgage crises. I call it the 30% rule. You require every bank with more than $1 billion of assets to own 30% of every loan that they make for the lifetime of the loan. Every financial expert I've talked to supports this. It would end the practice of coercive lending to people who can't afford the kind of mortgages, the subprime mortgages, and then the bundling of those mortgages into bundles and misrepresenting those bundles to people and selling them to them and then washing your hands of the whole thing.
But if you listen to what people are saying, and how many are saying, who knows, depending on what poll you want to look at, people want less government intrusion, and particularly they want government out of business. How do you sell that idea to John Q. Public, who's saying, no, I don't want the government extending its hands and its nose into more and more businesses. I want them out.
This is not that.
Well, if you're mandating, if you're going to dictate to the financial industry that, like, from now on, 30% you have to swallow.
That's right. No, not swallow. You just have to own 30% of the loan that you just made. 20, 30 years ago, in the days of small local banks, they owned a much higher percentage of that. In fact, some financial expert, I've talked to some financial experts that say it should be higher than 30%. Let's talk about the real problem in this country. The real problem in this country is corporate ownership of our government. Our tax structure has gotten so regressive, it's not even funny. In the 1950s, everybody glows about what was going on in the 1950s, and people claim that there's a socialist takeover of our government going on. That could not be farther from the truth. In the 1950s, the top income tax bracket was 91%. It's staggering. It was 91% for 10 years in the 1950s. Now, people had a lot more deductions back then, but still,